Hello, dear listener. Welcome. The Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove podcast coming to you 7:30 p.m. on a Monday night. And Scott's with us. How are you, Scott?
I'm great, thanks, Trevor. And yourself?
I'm very well. So
That's good. How are you, Joe?
And Joe's here as well.
Yes.
Joe's here as well. In the chat room, if you're there, say hello. This is a podcast, of course, where we talk about news and politics and sex and religion. If you make a comment in the chat room, we will try and incorporate it. So, Scott, on the agenda, because I know you've been busy and haven't had a chance to look at much, but I threw in at the last minute, maybe we should talk about France and what's happened there with the Prime Minister, and then maybe a little bit about the Greens and whether we should forgive them for 2009. And I know you're reluctant to forgive them. National Anti-Corruption Commission. Some interesting things happening there. We'll see where we end up. But, Joe, have you kept track of what's happening in France with Macron appointing a Prime Minister?
No, actually, I haven't.
Okay. So, basically Macron, well, there was a European election, and as a result of that, the left-wingers did quite well. And so Macron pulled sprung a general election on the French people in their sort of normal parliament, and it looked like the right-wing Le Pen was going to do quite well in the initial voting, but when it came down to the final voting, she did not. And the left wing did well. There were sort of three different groups. There was the left, which got a coalition of left-leaning parties, got 188 seats. There was the centre-right, got 161, and then there was the far-right, Le Pen, 142. Kind of more or less a third each, but with the left wing doing the best. And strange way they operate in France, Joe and Scott, where the president then decides who the prime minister is going to be out of all of this. And it's a strange mixture of responsibilities. It seems that the president is responsible for sort of foreign policy, foreign affairs type stuff, but then the prime minister is responsible for more domestic politics that they've got to get through the parliament and has to be able to maintain a majority. So anyway, with Macron, with his centre-right group, he could have teamed up with the left wing and nominated somebody from the left to be prime minister, but instead he nominated somebody from the centre-right, and that's going to require the assistance of Le Pen for everything to get through. So essentially, nice guy Macron, who everybody loves because he seems so handsome, a bit like Trudeau, is really ignoring the swing to the left in French voting and has hooked up a prime minister who's going to need the support of the right-wing Le Pen to get through. So even though the French people voted for a shift towards more left-wing politics, they've ended up with a right-wing
When's
result.
he moving the government down to Vichy?
What's that?
So when's he moving the centre of power down to Vichy?
What does that mean when you're saying down to Vichy?
The Vichy government, Vichy France was the side of French that supported the Nazis and that sort of stuff. The Vichy Republic, I think it was called.
So the northern half of France was occupied by the Germans. The southern half of France was free, nominally, but Vichy France was allied with the Germans.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's
And the
why.
centre of power was in Vichy.
Yeah.
And that's why. What's his name? Churchill went and sank the French fleet
Yes, in North Africa.
North Africa.
Because they had been lining up with the Germans.
Exactly.
They
And
were
he
worried
did.
that the French fleet would become a German allied fleet.
And they were worried about that and that sort of stuff, which would then screw over Britain's supremacy of the seas. So that's why they went in and attacked them while they're at harbour.
Anyway, under Macron, the rich are getting richer. I saw some statistics which was incredible about the how the sort of top 1% in France have have gathered even more wealth in recent times. And also he's responsible for raising the retirement age for French people. So they don't like him.
No.
And they voted against that sort of policy. Mm-hmm. And the way democracies worked, it hasn't really worked in the French case. And it hasn't shifted things in the direction that the people have asked. So a bit of a failure of democracy is occurring in France, I think we can say.
Well, I think the people are going to have their opportunity to vent their anger at Macron when the presidential election comes up, and I think that this is going to be his last term. I don't think he can actually run for another term, can't he, Joe?
No idea.
Okay. Well, anyway, I thought that he could actually run repeatedly. That he's not actually restricted to only run for 2 terms. So it really wouldn't surprise me if he does run again, but I just think to myself that he's probably dead in the water by the time he actually gets there. Because the French people have moved more to the left than the French government has. And like you said, the uber-rich in France are getting wealthier. And I don't know. And, you know, the whole thing about raising the retirement age, I think it was to move it up to 64, wasn't it, or something like that?
That was 67.
67, okay.
I thought it was a couple of years. I didn't know how many it was, but they certainly raised it.
Yeah, 67, which was only, which is the same age as the pension age is over here.
Mm.
You know, it's just, and their pensions are more generous than ours are. I think that you end up having a percentage of your final income and that sort of stuff being given to you as a government-run pensioner, I believe.
Okay.
So that is why they had to actually reduce the pension expenditure, because they would have been suicidal for them to actually cut the pension, but they had to reduce the number of people that are actually on the pension.
Because they're too generous.
Oh, it was way too generous, yeah.
Don't know about that, but yeah. So anyway, that's what's going on, a bit of a failure of democracy in France. Now, Scott, there was a bit of a discussion in Crikey about the Greens and the carbon pollution reduction scheme back in 2009.
Which they torpedoed?
Yes. And in Crikey, there was this article by Charlie Lewis saying how Labor has reminded the Greens yesterday of the party's 2009 rejection because Labor is seeking the opposition support for its watered-down industry-approved version of the Environmental Protection Agency. And they're basically, Labor is threatening the 2024 Greens, Scott, saying to them, if the Greens party doesn't support the government with its current EPA laws, this could be their carbon pollution reduction scheme mistake Mark II. That's what Tanya Plibersek is saying. And in the Crikey article, they are saying that lots of people can't even remember the 2009 carbon price reduction scheme, but that Labor's always trying to remind people of it. And,
well, they've got every right to remind them of it, because that was a bloody disastrous thing that the Greens actually did. Well, because they were insistent on a fixed price for carbon, which left Julia Gillard with no choice but to call it a tax, because it was a carbon tax. It was a carbon tax. If you had the fixed price on it, it was a tax. Now, the other thing was the CPRS was a actual genuinely market-driven approach to reducing carbon. The Greens said no. They were forced into negotiation.
Way of the government transferring large amounts of money to major polluters whilst pretending that they were costing them or taxing them money.
Who was that?
That's Joe saying that, not me.
Yeah.
If that article says that.
Yeah, I know the article says that, but you've got to take everything Crikey says with a grain of salt.
I'll just give you what the opinion is on this. So the opinion they're putting forward is that carbon price scheme from 2009 was widely regarded as an inadequate policy and friendless in all directions after it was voted down in the Senate in 2009, including by the Greens, and Labor replaced it with a more effective scheme, they're saying. And he's saying that it's been a hobby horse of Labor to keep banging on about it ever since. And they tell a bit of a story here. If the Greens had voted for that legislation in 2009, when Tony Abbott became leader of the Liberal Party in 2009, a carbon price would have been introduced and by today would have been embedded in the Australian economy. That's what Penny Wong was saying. And actually, I haven't highlighted what I need to highlight here. They're basically saying it was a terrible scheme that didn't achieve anything close to what was needed, so it was okay for the Greens to knock it back because it was just so bad it wasn't worth supporting in any way.
So there's a comment in here. In 2009, a question was asked of the Minister for Climate Change, Penny Wong, by Dr. Richard Dennis. But as the Senate vote gets closer, the first question the climate change minister must answer is, if the CPRS doesn't increase the cost of transport fuels, doesn't apply to agriculture, and as Treasury modelling shows, doesn't lead to a reduction in our reliance on coal-fired electricity until at least 2033, what does it actually do? So what they were saying was, it's a toothless, it's a paper tiger.
Yes. So, Scott, is it possible that we've been propagandised by Labor on this one, and that the policy that they were putting up was so weak that it was the right thing to do for the Greens to knock it back because it just wasn't going to achieve anything?
No, I think it was the only thing. The Greens had to knock it back because that gave them their political gain. You know, I just think it was all a game of politics and all that sort of stuff. Had we have actually started from there, now it was very weak, but it was only the first time that we had ever started to tax carbon in this country. Had we have actually gone down that road, we would have actually got the polluters and everything used to paying something. Then over time, we could have, they would have actually reduced the subsidies to the carbon polluters and that sort of stuff, so they would have had to pay a higher price on their carbon pollution.
Do you believe, though, that Dr. No would have accepted that? Or
he wouldn't have. He would have actually pulled it apart, absolutely, which is what he did. When he got elected, on that basis of lying, saying it was a carbon tax, then... He lied. Yeah, he lied, and he got elected, and he won because the Greens forced them into having a fixed price on carbon.
Yeah, but
had it have been a floating,
he'd still lied. He didn't want any price on carbon.
I know he didn't want any price on carbon, but I think to myself, had they have actually done that, rather than actually forcing Turnbull into the position that he was left with no alternative but to go, then I think that Turnbull's leadership possibly would have survived. Tony Abbott would have won the next couple of elections, but then he would have lost in the time when, Zali Steggall would have taken over. It's one of those things I don't think we're ever going to know, but it was the first time that we'd actually moved into this country to actually pricing carbon. So the first one was going to be weak. There is no doubt about that.
I think the problem was
it would have been a hell of a lot less than what the Greens wanted. But
I think it included a lot of subsidies for polluters.
Oh, of course it did. It included a hell of a lot of subsidies for them. Like I was just saying, over time they would have reduced the subsidies to those polluters that would have left them to actually pay a higher price on carbon.
Anyway, the point of this whole exercise is there's been a debate in Crikey, and the comment section was full of stuff, people toing and froing. But there is a counter-argument that it was such a bad piece of legislation that even in the benefit of hindsight, looking at it today, many argue the Greens were justified in knocking it back because it was so poor.
And more to the point, this APA Act apparently is so toothless and allows basically the polluters to carry on polluting that the Greens are equally right in saying, no, this isn't an EPA. It's just like the Corruption Commission that is so toothless that it can't investigate corruption.
We'll get on to the Corruption Commission next. But, it's... where's the line? At some point, Scott, you're right. You could say if it's a little bit of progress along the way, then maybe it's acceptable, even though it's got a long way to go. But then a counter-argument is that if it's so bad that it achieves nothing and sets up subsidies for decades and really is even worse than just a weak beginning, then maybe it's the correct thing to knock it back. So,
well, it's something we're never going to know the answer to.
yes, we could argue over that for weeks, but it's just letting people know that there's two schools of thought out there. What was that, Joe?
Some interesting commentary about how Labour is likely to rely on LNP preferences at the next election, particularly in inner city seats.
Right.
Because, it'll be the Greens versus Labour are the real running parties in the election.
Yes.
And the LNP absolutely won't vote for the Greens, so they might vote for Labour instead of the Greens.
Yes.
We just got to wait and see actually what happens, because if the LNP decides that a weaker Labor government is better than a stronger Labor government, I think they will actually preference the Greens. If they decide that where was I going with all that? If they decide it's better to have the Labor Party in a weaker position, they will preference the Greens. If they decide that the Greens are far worse than the Labor Party, they will preference the Labor Party ahead of the Greens.
What did they do last time?
Well, I don't know.
Right. I don't know either.
It's one of those things. I just don't think that either side should be. I don't think it's a good idea to preference the Greens or One Nation or anyone else. I just think to myself that they are fringe parties and that sort of thing, and we shouldn't be preferencing them.
Hang on, you're putting them down number one.
Yeah, I know I am, but and I'm not I'm really not looking forward to it.
Okay.
I think this whole preferencing thing is a farce, because anybody can vote any way they like.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what particular party goes, we're doing a preference deal with this person.
How many people follow the how to vote card is really what you say.
A really large number of people do actually follow a how to vote card.
Yeah, I think a large number do as well.
Yeah, they do.
Gut feel?
They just don't think about it and that sort of stuff. I actually refuse to follow a how to vote card. I work out ahead of time who's going where and that type of thing, and I vote in that way I wish to vote. And I already work everything out before I actually go into the place. But I'm a nerd, so I've got time and that sort of stuff, so I can put my thought onto it. But a lot of people just grab a Liberal or Labor how to vote card and work out which way they're going to vote that way.
I think they do. So I think that will be important. In the chat room is Don, Essential or Don Tuvi. Is that the same Don or is this a different Don? Yeah. And Alison and Tony Wall. Good on you, Tony. So, if you would like to raise a topic, feel free to. If you make a comment, I will do my best to incorporate it. So, anyway, just putting that forward because I know it's one of your hobby horses, Scott, and for those who get the show notes, they can see the arguments that I was reading about and figure out a position. So, National Anti-Corruption Commission. Need to talk about that a little bit. So, what we had was a Robo Debt inquiry that was superbly handled by the lady in charge of that inquiry that really found damning practices within the government department dealing with Robo Debt and people who were doing awful things knowing that there were awful results. And Labor comes in and creates an anti-corruption commission, and that commission has looked at the findings of the Royal Commission and has said, well, they've already done an investigation. There's no point in us doing another one. And a lot of people are completely floored by this.
As they bloody well should be. The Royal Commission named 8 people that they've sent off to the NAC to be investigated. The NAC took 12 months and then turned around and said, well, there's nothing for us to see here.
Because it's already been done by the Royal Commission.
But the Royal Commission, everybody knows that they can't actually
prosecute.
They can't prosecute and that sort of stuff. All they can do is hand people over to the relevant legal authorities.
Yes.
The first one was the NAC.
Yes. I'll just read exactly here a few things to put this in context. So this comes from New South Wales Supreme Court judge, or former New South Wales Supreme Court judge, Anthony Wheely. And he talks about this announcement that the Commission is not going to investigate the referrals of these 6 public officials that were explored by the Royal Commission into the Robo Debt scheme. And because the reason given by the NAC was further investigation was unlikely to produce significant new evidence. And he says that unlike Royal Commissioner Catherine Holmes, the NAC has the unique and specific jurisdiction to make findings on whether people referred to it had been engaged in corrupt conduct or should otherwise be dealt with within the meaning of the legislation. Commissioner Holmes from the Royal Commission did not have that jurisdiction or that capacity. It was beyond her jurisdiction to make any finding of corrupt conduct. That, dear listener, is what the NACC is supposed to do. And apparently the Royal Commissioner delayed her report for a week to make sure that the NAC was open for business. And this former Supreme Court judge is saying it's simply no answer to say, well, these people have already been investigated, of course. He's saying that it's up to the NAC to do its job, and by refusing to do it, it has betrayed its core obligation. And it's of grave concern. And none of the reasons given were compelling. Now, in a separate article, there's a guy, Stephen Charles, another retired judge, served on the Supreme Court of Victoria's Court of Appeal, and is a member of the boards of the Centre for Public Integrity and the Accountability Round Table. So the first guy and this guy are pretty well qualified to be talking about this sort of stuff. And he says that Commissioner Brereton, it seems, was good mates with Catherine Campbell because of links through the Army Reserve. So Catherine Campbell, of course, was the lady who came out very poorly in that Royal Commission. And Commissioner Brereton told Attorney General Dreyfus, I'm going to recuse myself from these considerations as to whether the NAC should recommend prosecutions against people like Catherine Campbell because of my conflict of interest. And in the end, though, he didn't recuse himself. He was actually in all of the meetings leading up to the very final decision. And this judge is saying, that's not a recusal. You needed to get out of the room from the very beginning and never enter it when these discussions were taking place.
Absolutely.
And hanging around while those discussions were taking place, and just removing yourself at the final decision time is not good enough. So it's an outrageous... this National Anti-Corruption Commission, it had one major job to do.
And it didn't fucking do it.
They've been acting corruptly.
And it's balls... Careful, Joe. It's ballsed it up from the very beginning, let's say. Let's not call it corruption, but let's just say a balls up.
No, I think it would be ironic, though, if they had been.
So how disappointing is that? And
It's incredibly disappointing.
yeah. You know, if Morrison was in charge, I'd be just going, fucking Morrison.
Yeah.
But it's bloody Labor and Albanese.
But no. But the Corruption Commission was always set up as a gentleman's agreement between the two major parties that they wouldn't investigate each other.
Yeah. And just the fact that
That's why
people
the Greens
expected...
were so adamant that it was different.
Right. Yes. Good on the Greens. And,
Yes.
of course, none of this stuff is public, which it's supposed to be with these sorts of inquiries. Everything's held in secret behind closed
it needs
doors.
to be public it needs to be public to inspire confidence in the process.
Exactly. So, yeah. There we go. Like, that's just so disappointing that we have just got such a poor result. Because there's terrible things done in that Robo Debt, and people need to be held accountable for what happened there.
Absolutely. People died. And I just think to myself that that's got to be the one thing that should have animated the knack into doing something about it, was that they have got blood on their hands exactly the same way as the bastards that were behind the fucking thing. And, I just... So this guy is mates with the Attorney General, is he?
No, the Commissioner Brereton has said that he had a conflict of interest. He hasn't said exactly what his conflict was, but people seem to understand that he's good mates with Catherine Campbell.
Yeah, who's one of those bits being
And
named.
they know each other through the Army Reserve. So it seems very probable that that's where his conflict is. And she, of course, was the main person ready to be nailed by potential allegations. So,
I mean, at least he didn't get a camper van out of it.
who got a camper van?
Who's
Careful what you're saying here, Joe, by the way.
Clarence Thomas in the
Clarence
United
Thomas,
States
okay, well, in the
Supreme
United
Court.
States. Okay, we can...
He has received a large number of benefits which are very, very suspicious.
Right. Yes.
And didn't recuse himself from a number of cases that directly impinged upon people who had given him large S.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is why I think AOC wanted to impeach him and one other justice.
Yes, I have heard bits and pieces along those lines. Yeah. So anyway, that is disappointing. Scott, have you been... you wouldn't have been, Scott. There's a new Star Casino in Brisbane.
No,
A new building on the riverbank.
Is it open?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the building's open, at least the public areas of it are, and some of the restaurants and things are. So...
that's assuming that you've got a casino company that's able to operate it.
Yeah, I don't know if the casino part's open, but you can walk across the bridge and walk through the building and whatnot. So, and they're already broke.
Yeah.
Well, they're broke not because of moving into the new building. They're broke because of the fines and that sort of stuff that they got carried over from their misbehaviour in New South Wales, don't they?
Yes, and they had form. So the Queensland government should never have approved them.
Absolutely, they shouldn't have
operator.
operated. And then there's all there's rumours and everything coming out that one of their mates is hooked up with the Chinese triad and everything else. You just think to yourself, bloody hell, it just gets worse and worse.
Yes.
Who operates Treasury?
Say again?
Who operates Treasury?
I think they do.
Star?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, it was going to be in competition with the casino that's...
No, Treasury was going to be closed down. I think that they have... I wouldn't be surprised if they've already moved out of that building, haven't they?
I'm not sure where that's at, but we've got the Queensland government is looking to inject money into the company to keep it going.
In return for shares, hopefully.
Because
it won't be
they
in return
never
for
do.
shares. It's just...
What they do is they say, we'll let you off gambling taxes and we'll let you off payroll taxes and we'll make it a loan for these things. But they never take bloody equity. Because of jobs, they're saying, we've got all these people who are employed in terms of the hotel accommodation and the retail and whatnot. And I just think to myself, why don't we just let the whole thing fall over financially and then the
find
bankers
someone else that
have
they
to
can...
sell it to some new operator, and
Exactly.
off they go.
They could be...
Trump would buy it.
Well, they'd be able to sell it to someone that's got form for running casinos.
Yeah.
They've got casino operators coming out of their wazoo in Macau. Macau's only just to the north of us. They're just on the same sort of peninsula as Hong Kong. I'm sure one or two of them will be looking for a new operation and that sort of stuff. They'd look down there and say, this is okay. It went belly up because of fines. We'll just take it over and start up.
They want it all nice and spick and running for the Olympics. That's a long way off.
It's
let the whole
2032.
business-
Exactly.
Let the whole thing go into
Collapse in a
financial
heap.
ruin and let somebody else buy it on the cheap under a mortgagee sale of whatnot and let them run it. It's not up to the government unless the government
They're going to take an equity
wants
position in it.
take the whole thing. Like, let it fail and then take an equity position. And if you want to run it, you know, why would you want to? No, the government shouldn't be running a casino, let's face it.
So the
No,
government,
absolutely not.
the government can own land and lease it.
Yes, and indeed. So, of course, this is the one idea of the Stephen Miles government that the Courier Mail approved of. As I was reading the editorial, which, dear listener, I read so that you don't have to, and it was like, as much as we don't like the idea, we think that Stephen Miles would be doing the right thing by supporting the casino operator in this case.
Telling me that a Murdoch newspaper is supporting the idea of transfer of public funds to a private owner?
Yes.
A wealthy private owner?
Yes. Shocked, I tell you. It was the first time I've ever seen them
Support Labor. Yes.
supporting an idea that Labor was considering. Yeah. So anyway, I'm jumping all over the shop here. It's 62 days since the Morrison government, not the Morrison government, it may as well be, since the Albanese government appointed the special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. And they were supposed to appoint a similar person for a similar role to combat Islamophobia. And 62 days later, nothing. Hey, I'm no fan of Islam.
Is a made-up thing.
What's that?
So Islamophobia is a made-up thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Has
just...
anyone actually reminded them that they had 62 days to do it and they haven't done it yet?
Well,
It's one of those things. I really wouldn't be surprised if they...
I forgot.
They're probably deliberately dragging their heels on it because they're not getting reminded in the media about it.
Yeah. Well, not in the mainstream media, they're not.
No, they're not.
Yeah. So, yeah. On that score of anti-Semitism, Mary Kostakidis used to be the SBS presenter, quite active on Twitter, and she basically retweeted some tweets which were from pro-Palestinian sources. And
Hamas, wasn't it?
yes, a video of a speech by Hezbollah leader
Okay.
in which he allegedly called for the ethnic cleansing of Israel. That's what the Jewish lobby is saying. And her defence is that... Oh, actually, let me get a bit more specific about what it said. In the retweeted video, Hezbollah leader says, "Here, you don't have future, and from the river to the sea, the land of Palestine is for the Palestinian people, and for the Palestinian people only." That's not necessarily calling for wiping out of Israeli people.
Well,
The
what would
killing
you
of
describe
them.
it as? What would you
It could
describe
be,
it as?
it could be they've got to go because this is our land. Doesn't mean we're going to kill them.
Bloody foreigners, go back to where you came from.
Yeah, so where are they going to go?
We're reclaiming our land. This is our land. We want our land back. It is for Palestinians, and these settlers, colonialists, have to go. So it doesn't mean they're going to. It doesn't mean they're going to kill them, but it's just saying they've got to go somewhere else because this is our land. Second thing is, above that quote, Kostakidis wrote, "Israeli government getting some of its own medicine. Israel has started something it can't finish with the genocide." So that's the sort of crux of what she's accused of tweeting. And someone from the Jewish organisations has made a complaint to the Human Rights Commission, and she's now facing a massive legal case. And it's a concern that she also argues you need to know what both sides of this conflict are saying. Like, this was one of the leaders of one side of the conflict saying something, and we need to know what these people are saying. And if we can't do that, well, we don't have the information we need to talk about issues. So I think she's making a fair point. Anyway, she's having to battle through the court system now, faced with charges against the Human Rights Act. And it really is a way of muzzling dissent if you are to make any comment that may be seen to be anti-Semitic, that you'll be taken on and run through the courts, and even if you are eventually successful, you'll be so battered and bruised afterwards that you wish you'd never said it. So
this has always been the counter-argument to these hate speech laws, which is technically what it is, has been that they will be used by the powerful to oppress dissenting voices.
Yes, even
It's
if
a
the
blasphemy
case...
speech under a blasphemy law under another name.
Yes. And even if the case is not particularly strong, but if you're powerful, muddied up, you just run people through the court system and beat them to death, which is what sort of Clive Palmer would do to a lot of people as well.
Allegedly.
Yes, allegedly. And yeah, so she's facing a battle there. Good luck to her. So that was her. What's the other thing I had on sort of Israel while we're at it? Something about just a reminder that the International Court of Justice on the 19th of July said Palestine is comprised of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza. Israel is illegally occupying Palestine. Israeli settlements in Palestine are illegal and must be dismantled, and Palestinians have the right to resist illegal occupation. So that's not a whole lot different to what that Hezbollah leader was saying, in that Palestine is for Palestinians and Israelis have to go.
Yeah, well, weren't the Americans trying to arrest the International Court?
Yes, but before we move on to that, like, when the court is saying Israeli settlements in Palestine are illegal and must be dismantled, and Palestinians have the right to resist illegal occupation,
How dare they be anti-Semitic? That's all I'm
not
going to
that
say.
far off from what that guy was saying. So, but of course, you never hear in this whole conflict with Gaza, when there's talk of the latest bombing, which there just isn't enough of, but you never hear, of course, Israeli settlers have killed another 3. Yeah, we can hear you, Scott. You're there.
That's good.
Israeli settlers have killed another family of Palestinians in the West Bank or something. You never hear them say, of course, the settlement, the Israelis are there illegally, and that the International Court of Justice supports the Palestinians. It's like it's ignored as if they never said it. And of course, we always get the statement about the international rules-based order and how important it is. And if the International Court of Justice is not part of the international rules-based order, then what is? But it
isn't. It's found against America's allies.
Indeed. So when it says the international rules-based order, you'll notice it doesn't say international law. It's the international rules-based order, which means the status quo that we've had for the last 70 years, thank you very much. That's what international rules-based order means. It doesn't mean international law. It's incredibly frustrating. Where are we up to? I'm still chopping and changing all over the place here. AUKUS, another critic this time New Zealand's former governor of the Reserve Bank, basically saying AUKUS is such a shit deal. What else we got? Scott, thoughts on Kamala Harris? Do you like her?
Ah,
Don't like her?
she's much better than Donald Trump.
Mm.
You know,
In what way?
well,
My
she's
testicles better than Donald Trump.
Yeah,
I
I know
wouldn't
that.
suggest
Anyway.
it should be president.
she was probably the best of a bad lot that they had left. You know, they had to choose someone because Biden refused to stand down and all that type of thing. There was no time to run an open campaign or anything else. So we didn't actually find out where her weak spots were. So, you know, we just got to hope for the best that she's going to actually win. Now, whether she actually wins and that sort of thing, whether or not she wins convincingly enough that that it'll put to bed any of the anti-Kamala Harris forces that are left out there is another story. I personally hope that the whole abortion ban thing is going to backfire very badly on the Republicans, to the whole point that that senator from Texas who went across to Cancun with his family to get away from the
Rubio?
no, not Rubio. It's got a beard now.
Yeah. I know the one you mean.
Anyway, he's
Ted something?
Ted Cruz?
Ted Cruz, yeah. He's apparently he's in for the fight of his life right now because he's only 2 points in front of the Democratic contender for his Senate seat, which is not a winning position for him to be in, whereas previously he's been 10 or 20 points ahead of the Democrats. Now he's barely 2 points in front, and they reckon most of that is because of the abortion ban, which he was very proudly in favour of and everything else until it became law, and then suddenly every bit of it was erased from his website. So I think that the Democrats are probably going to win based just on that. And because she is the head of that party right now and everything like that, I think that she's in a commanding position to win the presidency. Do I actually believe she's brilliant? No, I don't. I think that Hillary Clinton would have been a far better candidate than what she is.
Really?
But, well, she would have been better. She's still not an AOC. I understand that. She's not an AOC, but she was better than Kamala Harris. Because Kamala Harris isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. I don't think there's any doubt about that. She's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but she's better than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was far too old.
Right, but in terms of policies, she hasn't had to.
She hasn't said anything
policy.
new. No, she hasn't.
She hasn't got a single policy on her
No,
website.
now what she has actually said, though, she has actually said that she has taken a tougher line on Israel. She hasn't been as tough as you would want her to be, but she has actually taken a marginally tougher line than Joe Biden did.
Yeah, okay, let's just see what Kamala on. What did she say? Kamala Harris's Jewish outreach chief has just confirmed that she opposes returning to the Iran nuclear deal. And also speaking on the panel organised by American Jewish Committee, who says he spoke yesterday with the Harris campaign's new Jewish outreach chief, who assured him that the Democrat Party's presidential nominee would oppose a return. Oh, sorry, that was Iran nuclear deal. Again, sorry. I think she's been pretty hawkish in her support of Israel.
Well,
She might say some words like, oh, it's all got to come to a... We want this to be resolved. Not happy.
She hasn't actually said that.
I'm going to wring my hands a little bit.
She hasn't actually said that. What she said is you've got to have a ceasefire now, which is something a hell of a lot stronger than what Biden ever said. Biden never actually called for a ceasefire. He's called for humanitarian pauses and everything else. She's actually called for a ceasefire.
Well, she hasn't called for stopping. America could force a ceasefire
by refusing to supply them with arms. I agree wholeheartedly.
So it's just words to
Well,
assuage the feelings
And
of.
then lose the next election because of the Jewish vote in America.
So
Well,
she's
you've got
just
to-
playing
you've got to
word
actually-
games to
you've
keep
got to
a
actually-
constituency happy.
Yeah.
You've got to actually look at where the Jewish constituency lies. That is in New York and Florida. Florida has already been written off to the Republicans. New York is solidly Democrat, so she doesn't really need to pander to them.
It's about the propaganda and forces that they will bring to bear if she doesn't support.
Yep.
So
Do they
That's-
honestly believe that they'd be far better off under Donald Trump?
if Donald Trump is supporting Israel, yes,
Well,
And Donald Trump is supporting Israel because his fundagelicals want him to,
correct.
because they want war in the Middle East.
Yeah. So it's very easy to see that a very pro-Israel person would be very tempted to vote for Trump if they thought he was a 5% stronger pro-Israel candidate than Kamala Harris. She has to.
They might regret
Make
it
the
in the
noises.
long run, but they'd vote for him.
She's just making noises, Scott. She's not serious.
she's
Yeah.
making the right sort of noises, though.
To
Now,
keep
they're
people
not-
happy, but not to actually do anything.
okay, but she's actually saying something, whereas before they weren't actually saying anything at all. It's an improvement. It's not brilliant, but it's an improvement.
Okay.
You've got to actually look for improvements among some people. Now, you're not going to get anything. The US is so far down this whole Israel support thing that they don't know how to get off it.
Can't we reach a
Now-
point, though, where we look at actions rather than words? Because we've heard so much bullshit
Yeah,
that we
okay,
have to
and
say,
if-
I don't believe a word you say. I'll pay attention to your actions.
Yeah, okay, that would probably be better.
And
But we
then you'd
just got-
say nothing is going to change. Is she going to stop arms supplies to Israel?
Not
No.
initially, no.
Is she ever going to?
I just think to myself that she could actually say that and that sort of stuff, because she refused to go to Netanyahu's speech to Congress, which was quite a big thing for a vice president not to attend. She did have private talks with him and all that type of thing after that. Now, what actually said was there, well, no one will ever know because it was a private talk. But maybe she did actually say to him, you better stop fighting or I'm going to pull the pin on your weapons supply. I don't know. I hope that she did, but I doubt that she did.
She didn't say it.
Well, you don't know that she didn't say that because you weren't there as part of the meeting.
She. Why wouldn't she tell the rest of us if she said that?
I don't know.
It's because she's too
Or
scared
maybe
to.
there's a deal that allows them both to save face.
There is no deal that.
I mean, whoever thinks that the Democrat Party is anything other than a tool of the state?
Yeah.
They're both the same. Well, sorry, they're not both the same. In terms of international affairs, in terms of bombing other countries, in terms of being captured by corporations, they're both the same.
They are.
However, the Republican Party seem to be lurching their way towards some Handmaid's Tale.
Absolutely, they are. It's one of those things like you're either voting for the Republic of Gilead, stage one,
Yeah,
or you're voting for a continuation of the United States of America.
you might not like the United States of America, but it's a damn sight better than
Better than the
Gilead.
Republic of Gilead, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Republic of Gilead, I said to your wife once when she refused to watch The Handmaid's Tale, I said, I think that America's 2, possibly 3 bad decisions away from the Republic of Gilead. I think they've already got the first decision down under control, which was the abortion ban. And, they've probably only got another two very bad decisions before the Republic of Gilead becomes a real thing.
In the chat room, Alison says, Kamala Harris won't try to overturn the Constitution like Trump wants to. So the choice between them is about democracy. Well, it's true. If she
I agree with you,
loses,
Alison.
she will accept the decision when, of course, Trump won't accept the decision if he loses. So
No, I think it's only a matter of time, a couple of weeks away from when Trump starts talking about that they're already starting to rig the election.
Oh, he's already been saying that for months, if not
Yeah,
years.
I know, but he's been talking about his election that he lost. He hasn't actually been talking about the next election.
No. They've been saying if I win, it'll have been a fair election. Basically, he's already setting up for if he loses, it hasn't been a fair election.
yes,
He has also apparently pissed off his base by saying that he did lose the 2020 election.
did he say that?
Yeah.
I don't remember him saying that.
Because there's a bunch of fascists have been up in arms that he said that because he could have told them before they went out and committed treason, did an insurrection on January the 6th.
Look, he would have said two conflicting things in the same sentence.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, yeah, chop and change your story all the time. John Simmons, Hillary was a terrible candidate. I agree. She was awful. So I don't think she would have been any better than Kamala Harris because...
Well, she was a cuck, of course, famously.
So she was...
She was a what, sorry?
A cuck.
Because of Monica
cuckold.
Lewinsky. Is that what you're saying?
She was a cuckold.
What do you mean by that?
Her husband had cheated on her.
Yes.
Do you not remember Trump making the whole debate about that?
No, did he?
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track of his outrageous statements, isn't it?
It's like they were trying to talk politics and all he was going was, "Hi, your husband cheated on you."
Yeah. John also in the comments, did you start at 7:30? Yes, John. We said we would last week. So you have to pay attention. We did say we were going to start.
It's so that I can go to bed at a reasonable hour.
That's right, yeah.
Geriatrics.
I am very much an old man. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yes, Kamala will be better for democracy, the democracy that gives you the choice between the right-wing Republican Party and the right-wing Democratic Party and doesn't represent anything like what people might be wanting. So,
The biggest laugh I see
I've got to get you sitting down with my brother next time he's back in Australia because he actually says he was actually talking about a Chinese girl and that sort of stuff that was whinging to him about somebody in the school, and she was keeping her voice down very low so that no one could hear her. And Grant actually said to me, Landon actually said to me, he says, well, it's all very well for Trevor to say democracy is flawed, but at least you got a choice in a democracy. You can actually have a choice between two parties.
Is that a choice?
It is a preferable choice to having no choice at all.
Is it a choice? And there
is no choice at all in China. China decides the way things are done, and it comes from Xi Jinping and a clique of men around him that decide what's going to be happening over the next 10 years. That is not a choice for any of the citizens of that country. They are told what to do and they just do it.
Okay. On the other side, as a counterpoint anecdote, Scott, I've had Chinese homestay boys here.
Yeah, who
and
are
I've
very
said to them,
comfortable with it
hey,
because they don't know anything different.
Look at the situation here in Australia, and we've just had our election. And would you want that system in China?
And they say no.
And they were like, no.
Exactly.
The system that we've got works perfectly fine.
Which I can understand, but it's just one of those things. They've never actually had a long-term history of democracy like we have here in Australia.
Yeah, but this can be seen as a cultural thing, Scott. Like
absolutely, it could be a very cultural
two-party or three-party electoral system and democracy, as we understand it, is also a cultural thing that we're familiar with. And the Chinese have been operating for a long, long time with a different method of leadership and of appointing leaders. And just because it's different to ours, are we saying it's no good because ours is the best and anything else is an authoritarian mess? When really, if you're in that other culture, it's culturally appropriate and accepted. And is it really just a cultural difference? Is the Communist Party and the way it operates so bad? Or is it that culturally it's so unfamiliar to us that we can't get our head around it.
It's culturally unfamiliar to us. I agree with you there. But is it operating terribly badly? I don't know. I suppose you'd have to talk to one of the thousands of people that was shot at the Tiananmen Square massacre to find out whether or not they really appreciated their authoritarian government.
But maybe you could also talk to the 100 million people lifted out of poverty.
Poverty, exactly, by the international rules-based order that you often do talk down and deride. It is one of those things you can't
by the
have it
very
both
Communist
ways.
Party that you're deriding.
No, I'm not deriding. I suppose I am deriding the Communist Party because the way they treat their people.
Scott, here's the point. Scott, if you were able to wind the clock back 50 years and you're put in charge and you can determine how China operates, knowing what you know now, that if they follow this particular system, they're going to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty and China will be what it is today. Or you could 50 years ago say, you know what, let's impose a Western-style democracy on this country and do that instead. I would say, shit, I can't take the risk. What has been achieved in the last 50 years, I couldn't be comfortable that that's definitely going to be achieved under a Western-style liberal democracy. And for the sake of hundreds of millions of people lifted out of poverty, I wouldn't take the risk.
For $1 million a year, I'll be your benevolent dictator. I promise not to skim anymore. I promise not to set things up to help my mates. I'll govern for the good of the country.
But for every, Tiananmen Square you want to nominate, there's such a bigger success story here that it totally overwhelms all that. I think this genuinely is a cultural issue where we've been propagandized. Because here's the thing, the argument today isn't that capitalism is better than socialism.
No, it's not.
Because economically, looking at GDP and lifestyles, it's clear that America is falling into rack and ruin.
Absolutely.
And countries like China and Singapore and others are becoming very successful. So the argument that, communism is evil and doesn't work isn't cutting through.
Water.
So the argument now is, they're awful authoritarian regimes and we are Western liberal democracies and they will try to impose their will on us if we don't control them. So that's how the narrative has had to shift in the last 10 or 20 years from our economic system is better to one where the authoritarian system of theirs is a dangerous thing that we just don't want to enter our country. So it's...
John Simmons has raised a very good point there. He says cultural revolution, that could have been done without that. The Cultural Revolution was something that I think that they would have been better off avoiding.
It had... What's he mean by that?
Well, it's just saying that
keep it going the way it was.
Yeah,
What's he saying?
By keeping it going the way it was, the Cultural Revolution was happening.
But had the Cultural Revolution not happened, China would be a better place further.
Mm.
So not everything that the Communist Party did was a good thing.
No,
of course not. But if you look from Deng onwards, from the 70s onwards, the last 50 years, it's been the Communist Party in charge and it's been a bloody good result.
Yeah, it has been a very good result. I've got no doubt about that. It has been a very good result.
And the people there are enormously happy. Like, Scott, you mentioned your brother's, student who was whispering and,
No, it wasn't a student. It was another teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you look at things done, say, by Pew Research or others, where they do, how happy are you with your government and your democracy? Invariably, China leads by the top of the rankings.
Yes, of course. When the Pew researchers are out there with
no,
their secret
it's not
police
because
following them.
no, it's not because of that. And when you read the fine print of how they do the studies, people are not scared. They're giving their honest opinions. But so we're just refusing to accept that the people in that country could possibly be happy with that system when all the evidence is that they are. And it's a
they
different
probably are
system
happy
to
with that
ours.
system. But, would you like that system imposed on us?
Well, culturally, I don't like the Asian aesthetic of temples with red and gaudy things because culturally I've been attuned to a different aesthetic. And the same with democracy is I've been culturally attuned to accept and expect and want a certain thing. So, no, I don't want it. But I'm saying that for those people, I get that it makes sense for them.
So you're
Yeah,
saying
but the
that
people of
Afghanistan, because they've been raised with women having no expectation of being a human being, that's their culture, and therefore who's to say that's a bad thing?
No, well, you see, I get that the women in Afghanistan are pissed, and I totally...
But that's only because they've had Western ideals imposed upon them by the colonial invaders that came the last 20 years.
Yeah, maybe.
I understand, but you've got to look at those photos and everything that were taken in Tehran and also Afghanistan 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You had women that were in short skirts, they were just down below their knee and that sort of stuff. They looked very attractive. They had their hair was unveiled and everything else.
Yeah, very Western looking.
They were very Western looking.
Yeah.
Now, in 50 years' time, that has been turned around entirely because of theocracy.
Yeah. Yep. So, but I'm not here saying that an Islamic Republic is a great thing.
No, it's not. It's an appalling thing. Anyway.
But I am saying that the system of government that the Chinese people have has been extremely successful and is very well supported by their population and undoubtedly has performed very, very well. And we have to keep in mind that maybe it's just because we're not culturally attuned to it and it's different to what we're used to.
Yeah, okay.
And we've got people who are in the business of propagandizing us to try and make us think that we've got to have an enemy in China.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things. I don't understand how anyone can see China as our enemy. They're not our enemy or anything else. They are a trading partner. They are a big country and everything else. We've got to we're a little country. We've got to suck up to all the big countries on both sides. Now, AUKUS is going to make that incredibly difficult for us to do. Secondly, though, I would actually ask, I'm not sure how to put this, but Taiwan is basically China. Now,
yes,
it is, for the history and everything else says that they were all the same stock. They are the Chinese people that were defeated in the Civil War. They went across the ocean and that sort of stuff. It was only that the Americans parked a carrier group between the two sides that stopped them invading them, Culturally, they're the same and everything else. They speak the same language. They haven't modernized the way they write the language or anything like that. They still write in the old-fashioned way, but they are basically the same people. They speak the same language. Yet democracy has taken off very well in that little country. But
have you seen the Taiwanese parliament?
Yeah, I know.
Do you remember we showed the guy grabbing the bill and running out of the parliament?
I know.
Do you remember that?
I have seen that. But in the public's mind, they have a democracy that they're quite proud of.
Yeah.
Now they have built that themselves. They were a dictatorship for a very long time. I've got no doubt about that. The Kuomintang were not the nicest people in the world, and they had a military dictatorship for several decades. However, it has evolved into a modern liberal democracy now. Now, if it can work on that side of the Taiwan Straits, why couldn't it work on the bigger side of the Taiwan Straits in the PRC?
It possibly could.
Yeah.
But if which is working better?
Well, I would say that a lot of the gains that China has achieved, have been at the cost of pollution and other such things that people haven't yet seen the cost of. And I think
Yeah, but China is actually leading the world in renewable energy, though. Now
is.
they are making the batteries of the world, which are very pollution sort of. It's a very pollution
Yeah.
intensive
But they've
intensive
built
industry.
more renewables in terms of solar power
Yeah, than what
and
we
wind
have
power.
over here. Yeah.
Yeah, because that makes sense. I would agree, but they are still forgetting carbon pollution, other pollution.
Yeah.
So a lot of these huge, rapid changes wouldn't have been able to occur under a democracy where people are being held to account.
No, that's a
Whereas
very
when
good
you have a
point.
unistate system, you can get away with rapid changes that require large amounts of pollution.
That's a
But you
very
know
good
what?
point.
Is the UK has got sewerage in,
Oh,
running into open rivers, and it's
yeah,
a democracy.
Absolutely.
Yes, because people aren't being held to account.
Well, but it's a democracy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know.
But, at least there's going to be a chance that maybe this new Labor government will actually hold people to account.
But only if the Greens can get a real EPA in that's not toothless.
Yeah.
Because this is the problem in the UK is effectively the pollution laws say it's going to cost you a £50,000 fine, whereas it's actually going to cost you $1 million to fix the infrastructure that's causing the pollution. And they go, all right, we'll pay the £50,000 fine. It's worth it.
I think Tony Wall in the chat room said something about it's been said democracy is the worst form of government except for all others that have been tried so far. Yes.
I've seen that attributed to Churchill. Could be wrong,
Yes.
though.
I've seen the same thing. I've seen the same thing attributed to Churchill too.
Socrates believed voting, either directly or for representatives, requires a skill and wisdom that not everybody has. And getting those people without the skill, and giving those people without the skill the ability to vote could lead to the equivalent of societal shipwreck. This is Socrates. Socrates famously characterises democracy as the rule of the unwise, corrupt mob. Like children loose in a candy store, the democratic herd pursues pleasures only, rewarding sweet talkers and flatterers with the power of political office, who in turn exploit politics for their own gratification. The result is injustice. Accordingly, Socrates says, democracy ultimately dissipates or dissolves into tyranny, a population of citizens dominated by their basest desires and an opportunistic ruler that manipulates them for personal gain. I reckon America has reached that point.
We should bring in voting licenses. You have to prove that you're actually engaged with the political process before you can vote. The problem is we know that the voting license will be skewed in favour of whoever is in power.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah.
There you go. Tony says he prefaced the statement with, it has been said. So it wasn't his sentiment. He was merely repeating it.
Okay.
Yes. So, from, what else can we say?
He was quite good mates with Stalin too, wasn't he?
Were they?
Well, they were better mates than the Yanks were with him.
Probably. I mean, Stalin at least was European. None of these uppity colonials.
John's going to send me a video about that he saw about voting systems. Okay, John, thank you for that. Well, gentlemen, I reckon we've done enough for this episode. Good to have you, Scott.
No worries, Trevor.
A regular time of 7:30 will make it a bit easier for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Next week, I think I'm around. School holidays coming up. We'll see how we go. But at this stage, mixed bag of babysitting and down the coast, so not sure. But anyway, at this stage, 7:30 Monday next week. We'll aim for that. Otherwise, bye for now. We'll talk to you then. Bye.
It's a good night from me.
And it's a good night